You're listening to The Residential Movement, where the focus is on making in-home dental care normal instead of novel or niche. I'm your host, Dr. Ashley Robinson, a house call dentist with a lot of passion for reaching patients who are best served in their home or residence. I'm here to encourage, equip, and empower dentists like you to begin offering in-home dental services for patients who cannot get to the office, while also enjoying a more balanced work life. We discuss everything from dentistry, business, ethics, mindset, and more. Listen in to learn how you can become a part of the residential movement. Hello there. I've been unpacking and moving into my new house lately. Well, it's a new to me house. It's actually a very old house, an old farmhouse built in 1870. I know it's going to require a lot of work over the years, but it's just so old and charming that I absolutely love it. Anyway, I was unpacking our books, and I was overwhelmed because there are just so many of them. Now, normally when I move, I try to purge. I like to donate or get rid of everything I'm not using. Old clothes, coffee mugs, anything like that. I don't like to collect or to hoard things. But when it comes to books, it's funny because there are so many books I realize I am just never going to part ways with. I think Chris and I will always have a large book collection. I know you didn't get this far into your career without reading. Still, I do hope that you've been reading more than just academic journal articles lately. I believe reading general nonfiction is incredibly important regardless of your field. It allows us to learn from people that we may never meet and see the world from an entirely new perspective. It increases empathy, vocabulary, and just ensures that we're always learning and growing. Official members of the residential movement are invited to join me live each month for book club meetings. There's something extra special about reading, learning, and growing together. For the first few months, I've chosen the books, but in time, I'd love to get members choosing the books too. The book club is a part of the membership because reading will only make all of us better house call dentists. When I was going through all of my books, I realized that for this week's episode, I'd like to share 3 of my favorite books with you. These are books that I think everyone should read, but they're especially important for you if you want to be an awesome house call dentist. So add these ones to your reading list. The first book I want to tell you about is called Mountains Beyond Mountains by Tracy Kidder. This book was required reading for me during college, but I wasn't required to read it during class. I was required to read it before attending my first international immersion trip. This book tells the story of Dr. Paul Farmer. He's a man who came from very humble beginnings and eventually became a distinguished Ivy League MD PhD who could have gone anywhere or done anything. He was always invited to the fanciest conferences to rub elbows with other distinguished doctors, but he chose to spend most of his career in Haiti treating patients with multidrug-resistant tuberculosis. Sure, during the book, we do learn about healthcare, like the obvious disparity between the U.S. and Haiti, and the remarkable clinical reality of working in the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. Funny enough, he actually does take a trip to patients' houses, so he kind of does what we do. But what I found most remarkable is his dedication to justice in general. One of his most famous quotes is, "The idea that some lives matter less is the root of all that is wrong with the world." And I think he's right. I'm grateful that I first read his book when I was so young before I began any clinical training because it helped me determine the kind of healthcare provider I wanted to become. I knew I wanted to reach underserved patients. Now, if you're offering house calls to those who wouldn't otherwise be able to access care, you're addressing disparities in your community already. The next book I want to tell you about is called When Breath Becomes Air. It's a memoir written by another Ivy League physician, neurosurgeon Dr. Paul Farmer. He writes this book as he's dying of metastatic lung cancer. It's amazing to hear his reflections on what matters in life and also to watch his transition from doctor to patient. This book makes you feel incredibly connected to this man as he writes about the birth of his daughter, his deterioration, and then ultimately his wife wraps up the book once he's actually passed. I remember reading this book on an airplane for the first time when I was returning from a dental conference during school. I was in a middle seat between 2 very quiet people, and I was sobbing uncontrollably. It was super embarrassing. Anyway, reading this for the first time helped remind me that no matter what type of dentist I'll become, I'm first and foremost a human, and I always want to cherish my time with loved ones. I wonder how this book would make you feel about your priorities. Finally, I want to tell you about a more recent addition to my library. My mom recommended that I read James Clear's Atomic Habits. This book isn't new, and I've heard a lot about it before, but I only recently read this one. Clear advises us on how to establish good habits. The idea of big life change is amazing, but can sound very overwhelming. For example, think about training for a marathon if you've never run before. This can sound very overwhelming. What if you just committed to running a little bit each day? Soon, running a marathon won't seem like that much of a stretch. His advice for sticking with habits is that we have to make them obvious, attractive, easy, and satisfying. It's been an interesting read for sure. There's a reason it's been a bestseller forever, I guess, so just make sure to grab your copy. I guarantee these 3 books will affect the way you practice. So the reason I have a hard time parting with certain books is because I do like to reread them. You can read the same book a dozen times and find different takeaways. That's especially true with the first 2 books mentioned here. Admittedly, I haven't reread Atomic Habits yet. If I haven't sold you on the types of books that I like, that's totally fine. We all have our own styles, our own tastes. So please just read the books that you feel called to read. They'll only make you a better clinician and a better person. If you're interested in reading in a community, consider becoming an official member of the Residential Movement at residentialmovement.com/official membership. The current members already know this, but I want to make sure all of you know this in case you're deciding to join the membership. My grandmother passed very suddenly, so some of the meeting dates in the community are going to change here throughout the end of October. Thank you for being so understanding. Finally, as always, please consider supporting those in need of in-home dental care by contributing to the Home Smile Care Foundation. Learn more at homesmilecarefoundation.org. Thank you for listening in this week. Happy reading. I really, really appreciate you. That's a wrap on this episode of the Residential Movement. If you like what you heard today, please leave a 5-star review and subscribe so you don't miss an episode. If you know someone who could benefit from this information, please share this with them. All of these actions help fuel the Residential Movement. Visit residentialmovement.com for show notes and for access to any links referenced in this episode. Thanks again for listening, Doc. Keep up the good work.